Welcome back. So again, where we left off and where we got to, if you'll notice, the background color used to be the dark color of the suit, and now we've got backgrounds of both the upper and lower body kind of broken, and they are very distinctly the highlight colors instead of the base colors. I think that contrast makes it look nice. I don't think the silhouette is the perfect shape. I did also add smearing, which is something maybe you felt and will now see at such a reduced speed. Some really cool in the near future. I will drop the add-ons just in the description. I'm not gonna bother with overlays. I'm also not gonna bother with sound effects this video. I'm tired. I'm sorry. Yeah, the majority of this was all done since I last woke up. I can't say today because it is long since past midnight. Began this up, moving off of the constants, realizing that the head controller, something was absolutely fundamentally broken. Similarly, trying to stream both online and record my partner playing Animal Well did not pan out, and that crashed. So while that was a fun thought to have a little distraction while things are going on, it did not pan out. Not on my end, surprisingly. Funny enough. Anyway, yeah, I knew splining, or dealing with the splining was going to be absolutely atrocious. A lot of the poses had what ended up very quickly demonstrating itself to be very frustrating to fix, where the keyframes, especially the like charging up half of the keyframes, filled in almost perfectly. It was actually throwing the punch where the hand goes from one side of the body to the other, that both hands kind of decided to take linear paths directly through the body. So lesson learned from that is add one more keyframe, not on the extremes, but add another keyframe to that pose that's going to prevent the hands from going through the body. pretty self-explanatory. I think a lot of my workflow kind of started breaking down once I had the graph editor open. I kept thinking that I needed to modify the existing keyframes, where I think at no point was I prevented from just adding an intermediary keyframe. What ended up happening way too frequently was I would just start animating ahead as if I were drawing, which I say like it's a bad thing. I mean it as in it's a time-consuming thing. I think I could have jumped a little faster around, but I will say something with the animation or with my rig or something had the head and that right arm's elbow fighting me, to the point where I did just really granularly take it frame by frame by frame by frame, trying to do any corrections I could. I still don't know what's wrong, and if I'm honest, that is the main reason I don't feel super confident in sharing the rig, because the rig is broken, and a majority of this, like 8 hours of work, was spent fighting my own rig, which is not the place you want to be in, especially if you're downloading somebody else's stuff. I don't want to share stuff if it's not working. There's some parts of this I'm more than happy to go into as much detail as needed and explain, not sped up. I'm happy to show you how it's done. But you got to ask first, because my end goal is, as we saw at the beginning and as we'll see again, hopefully soon, I'm trying to animate this thing. Happy to make tutorials along the way, but as I'm figuring things out, I'm taking some prerequisite time to kind of reflect on it and package it in a way. And I'm still not catching all the long pauses. But I'm doing my best. It's not good enough. The head and that elbow are truly things I'm not proud of, and I'm looking forward, especially to trying again from scratch. But as we are so close to the finish line, I'm pushing so hard because I've got all deadlines are fairly arbitrary, but basically got until the 4th to win a little petty race, and I simply will not lose when it comes to a battle of putting in the hours. That's one thing about me. Happy to share that. Another thing about me, I can just kind of push through that feeling of feeling sleepy. One thing I don't like is being befuddled by graphs. I love math. I thought that this was going to click. I don't know why I thought this was going to click. This at no point, I would not say that there was a click that happened. In fact, I believe we're still in stream 1 of the 3 I've compiled for this chapter, or this progress snapshot. I kind of pace these out by getting to where I think I get to a point where I am proud of the state of the animation. And what ended up happening was 2 full streams, essentially, like almost 6 hours of work, resulted in, cleanup. I believe the last thing I really had was still just keyframes. So introducing the spline introduced a lot of brokenness almost immediately. So just fixing stuff that shouldn't have been broken to begin with for a 103 frame animation that's going at 24 frames per second, kind of putting one next to each other didn't really feel impressive, especially, and I'm saying doesn't feel impressive from the point of view of someone who is not an animator. I feel that if you're following along with this at all, you at least have a passing interest in animation, and hopefully can value the effort that it takes to do it. But again, for somebody who's just catching the GIFs on Twitter, all very few people who see my tweets as this is happening, you should follow me on Twitter. It's not as impressive as where I got this to. It took more time, and that is something I have had the good fortune. Anyway, we are just now. This is becoming the second stream, so I've slept between the last 10 seconds you've seen. But since this stream began, I have not slept since, and that includes me recording this. Yeah. You'll notice I'm really, really, really fighting that elbow. I'm realizing, just modeling wise, maybe why you don't have completely separate bits for the hand and the forearm and I just patted the upper part of my arm. I forgot what it's called. It's not the humerus. Although it's humerus, I thought it was. Anyway, yeah, here's me frame by frame by frame by frame by frame, painstakingly fixing that gosh darn elbow. I eventually found out that the pull target for the IK, because it's inverse kinematic the way the hand's set up at the moment, the pull target can be unparented and just free flowing, and that kind of fixed some things. Similarly, the head was kind of like, whew, the head was really stupid. I don't know at what point, even watching back, I don't know at what point I induced like a 270-degree turn on every axis. But it ended up with me eventually having the eureka moment of deleting all the keyframes and it just kind of fixing itself. Um, there's some, I'm trying to push some squash and stretch. Probably could have pushed, actually scaling the some bits of it. But I was really just trying to match shape still, get that sense of like weight and forward momentum into the punch. Still very much looking forward to adding some 2D VFX for the bird specifically. I'll be the first to admit the bird's gone. That last, I think it's still the thumbnail of the last video. I included a bird. I included a very ugly bird. And my introduction of the bird was entirely based on keyframing its global scale to 0 until it came out, and then back to 0 once it goes away. And that looked just really bad. And the geometry of it, it was still trying to use a Fresnel node. Just, it's such a fool's gambit to think that you're going to get much of value out of a Fresnel for the style I'm going for. For how much I have attempted to use a Fresnel, I have never successfully gotten what I want out of the Fresnel. Regardless, I am painstakingly just nonstop using Graph Editor, using the actual viewport, using that camera view. I think over on the very far right, that's how I turn on and off the main and secondary layers of the rig. I've got to find a way to introduce some like hiding of body parts, because I think, especially with the IK hands, especially with those broken wrists, there was no real ability for me to focus as I kept getting distracted. That's, I think, the biggest challenge when you're working on aesthetics. When stuff looks bad, it really sticks out. And that's hard to, it's hard to prioritize on the fly. And as a first animation, I'm doing everything on the fly. I'd love to hear if anybody else has had experience animating, if there's a better approach, especially now that I've actually just sunk my teeth in. I think a big fear with a lot of Blender, and a big reason I am interested in putting this kind of stuff out, especially with animation or like long process projects, especially if you're self-taught like me, there's a lot that's kind of just assumed. And I recognize the irony of me acknowledging those assumptions while I speed up most of what I'm doing and I talk at a very high level. Again, sound off with some questions if you have any. I am dying to answer specific questions, because I'm just going off what I think is interesting here. And what I think is interesting is what I'm failing at. So the things I'm doing right are I'm taking for granted, and things I'm figuring out are the ones I'm trying to highlight. But yeah, big thing I think would be to treat the keyframes. I think I did the keyframes really well. I think even before splining, I should have done one more set of key poses just in the in-betweens, kind of treat it like traditional hand-drawn, I should say, animation, and then start working with the spline instead of directly against the spline. And I still believe that I should completely change how I make models and not have this weird skinning across the arm. If you watch really slowly, when he brings that fist up originally, man, early on, the head was wobbling, the arm was wobbling. It looked so floaty in the most like tepid and unsure way. But here we are finally introducing the third stream. I did go to work between when the background shifted. When I came back, I said, no more no more of that frame grossness. Not frame, animation. No more animation. Let's go back to what I deserve a treat. So I made the background a tiling paper texture. I slightly revamped, and even though, yeah, maybe you can tell at this speed, but this is where I finally just get absolutely fed up with how floaty that head looks. That even as I'm treat in mouth playing with the shaders, I have to fix the head looking like he's in the process of getting possessed as he's trying to throw a Falcon Punch. His head does not move in the reference, and eventually I figure out just to, again, hold it as a constant. And here I decided to kind of do a little math, because those frames are coming in at a different rate than the original that I'd been comparing to. So I'm actually off screen taking notes on which frames the bird's out, which frames the circle VFXs are coming out, and on what they're centered, because it starts on the body, moves to the hand, and then becomes the bird. So I've got those frames off to the side, so that's gonna inform where I draw them. But to still procrastinate on drawing, what I do is I break up the body into different vertex groups. This is how I do that, like, floating background. You're gonna get to see the cool bits now, because I am decent at these nodes, which is why they're a treat for me. Because I was procrastinating learning how to animate for the longest. But yeah, the idea is to use a selection, use that selection, send it out to the input so that you can pass in a vertex group. And because I grouped off the right arm, the left arm, the torso, the head, both legs together, and then both feet, basically what I do is I extrude the faces a little bit. I draw a convex hole around it, which basically is a fairly minimalistic geometric representation. And then I project it in camera space behind the body. So I've got basically a very flat shape representation of a space around the vertex group I made of in this case, the right arm, the punching arm. And then I'm playing with some things. I'm attempting to see in what degree I can expand the faces before and after it's hulled, and before and after it's flattened in camera space. And then you get a pretty cool look if you just apply the resultant normals to it and extract the faces of the convex hull. Like, I think that looks really interesting. However, it is that normal map is a tangent normal map. And I was going to say it is tangential to the effect I'm going for, which still being the Falcon Punch, and not, I think it would be really interesting to do like a Whitebeard's from One Piece, his fruit. I think you could do like an interesting like crack in space and animate that, but sheesh, that stuff looks rough drawn 2D. I don't know how to make that look good in 3D at all. So I'm trying to play with still doing this background where I'll see if I can find the artist's name, but there are these cool pictures where the foreground and background have this like interplay where there's not boundaries between them in all the senses that you want. And that's the other reason I keep pushing this noise offset to the convex hulls, is I want that background not to just be a like static silhouette. I want there to be some like negative space interplay with the model and the background that he's kind of like blending into. And I still think it looks good with like all blue. Like, still to this second, I do think it looks good with the dark blue and with the dark yellow. But right here, I'm realizing, shoot, I do need a little more contrast if I want to really emphasize shape. So I can't use my line art stuff because these modifiers are applied directly on the model. So to get around that, I still get that like nice negative space. If you look across his chest here, you're saying like from behind to in front is still one color. I find the exact way that I've mixed the color on the body, and I just plug that color into the back. And then to really push it, to really give that last oomph for outlining, I use the same method I use to fake the rim lighting, where that lighting where it looks like it's bleeding into the background, that is now on the opposite side. And instead of brightening the model, it's just solid black. So on one end, you've got bleeding into the background, and on the other, you've got hard outlines, which I think as like a little bit of rhythm, a little bit of composition, you're implying more of the shape while still having it because it is rendered in 3D. But you get away with a much more like impressive 2D look. And then I add some smears. Auto smears, pretty cool tool. It took me a second to figure out, probably because I'm really tired. I think it ended up making sense. I think my model had the materials in the wrong order, was why I couldn't get this to click for the longest. But C'est la vie came out great, and there it goes. And then I put it all together, and getting rid of that other outliner I think was a good idea, because it's no longer rendering at like 20 minutes. It's still rendering under a minute. Yeah, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Big thank you for watching. Be sure to follow me. I think I got more in the works and would absolutely love to devote a greater amount of time to this stuff. I need to finish building up the portfolio, potentially land somewhere, potentially start. I'm not gonna. I don't have anything to sell yet, But I think as a viz test about coming to a close, Mike could start working on a game. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. See you later.